The Colombia conflict, so it's a war that, kind of really started before 1964, but 64 is when the real, the serious insurgency started. And I should add, 16.9, so 17% of the Colombian population, which is what, 52 million? 50 million? Yeah, 52 million. 17% of the Colombian population were victims of this war. Went on for 50 years. Victims of the war. 17%. It's not fun in games, man. It's not fun. The armed revolutionary forces of Colombia, these are the FARC. These are people who felt a grave injustice, and felt an injustice from the government, and injustice from the inequality, the intense inequality in Colombian society, and so took up arms. These are people, just like maybe you would be or I would be, that's going to join up. We're going to go join this militia. We're going to join this movement. Okay, well, that's what happened in Colombia. And then it went on for 50 years of fighting. 17% of the population. Here, look at this. By the way, go back to that slide. Doesn't that look like the slide from the NFAC or the other militia group from Michigan? Looks like the same people, right? It's the same slide. Instead of Colombians, they're just, white Americans or black Americans. Go to the next one. This looks like that slide. Remember that one from the NFAC? It looks like, or the militia group with their camouflage fatigues walking across the field in training. Well, that's what these guys are doing. It's the same thing. It's in Colombia. But here we have it in the U.S. So the same process goes on. Julie is a sociologist. She's studied sociology in Colombia, which means she's a radical. She was trained to be a radical leftist.
Was trained, but life changed me.
Yeah, the strain of life. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about what I said, what I talked about, the collapse and the violence, and how that reflects what Colombia has experienced? Like, how do you relate to that?
Well, first thing that I have to say is I'm just bringing here my view as a Colombian. I'm not speaking from every Colombian, or I'm not having the voice for every person in my country. Lucky me and my family, we haven't been victims of the conflict, like directly.
Yeah.
But as a society, we have been damaged in several ways, because me and my parents and pretty much my grandparents, we haven't known a country without conflict. It's really hard to realize that you were part of at some point, just because you were not involved, and that makes you part at the same time. Yeah. But actually, people who had like the most impacts and were like really suffering that period of conflict were mostly in the countryside and other regions rather than Bogota. And I'm not saying that people in Bogota, which is the capital city, didn't have like an impact or so, but it was like pretty much other people.
Like when Lori and I were there one time, there was the bombing at the mall, right near our house.
In a mall.
In Andina.
Yeah. In a mall.
Yeah.
It's just hard to think. We are hopeless trying to think a country without conflict, and despite there's a lot of people suffering around that, there's a lot of blindness with the conflict from many other people. It's like if you talk with someone from the countryside, you find one type of country, and if you talk with people from other areas and other low incomes and different socio-economic status or so, you can find another country, like two different perspectives. So we are very divided. In this moment, Colombia just elected the first left-wing government in its history. And many people is thinking that we are becoming a national guerrilla again or so, but it's not true. But at the end, it's just a matter of power. Like, people in power, war is really convenient for people in power because they can keep us just fighting against each other for something that we really don't understand.
And I think about these groups here in the United States who, between them and the government and the military and the police and everyone who's just battling it out, and sometimes they just join and have no idea what even they're fighting for. Like people who are, wherever it is, I mean, most people just have no thoughts about it. You and I were listening to, remember that when we were listening to the live stream of the Truth Commission, and some people were telling their stories. I mean, could you just say something about the pain and the heartache that it's real? This isn't a Hollywood movie. It's real people's lives. I mean, could you just kind of help us to see that a little?
I'm related to those kind of stories and testimonies from people because I read it and I have heard people telling me about it, but not directly like suffering that. I used to work with people in displacement or so, but it's not always, you can hear, you can read, and you can just maybe see some pictures of things, but you never experience that in your real body until you really have to experience that. So recently, I think it's an English version if you want to know more about it, in the Comisión de la Verdad, which is Commission of the Truth. It was a commission that was made after the peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla. They made a report. They went for 3 years across the country, listening to people's testimony and trying to find what happened, what were the kind of things that people suffered there, like people were raped, displaced, burned. I mean, I don't know how to say those kind of horrible things in English, but they were really damaged, not just physically, but mentally, sexually, and in our society was damaged by that. So people, this is real. So you don't want to have this in your own society. This is real. This is real, seeing people without parents, without children. There are many people disappear right now. There's an entire commission trying to find where are they, because there's a large, I can't have the name in my mind, but I think it's about like 3,000 or so people disappeared because of the conflict. And it's so hard when you can find your relatives and you don't know where they are, and maybe they give you some bones and you have to bury them thinking they are, but they're not. And everything is damaged because of that. Like, if a society can just live without this inner conflict, you can study properly, you can eat properly, you can have access to basic needs. And I'm talking about the people who suffer that in the countryside. So there's a lot of things that are real. It's not just that picture, it's not just what you can see in the news. You can see people in the streets begging for food, asking you for money. Of course, crime in big cities start to increase because people who was displaced from the countryside, they came to the big cities trying to find a way to survive. And there's a lot of organizations that try to help them, but if we don't go to the truth, we just can't solve that. So yeah, the suffering is real.
First off, these are all Christians, right? Colombia is a Christian nation. So when you have this idea of like Muslims do this, Christians don't do this, there are wars and dastardly destruction all over the world done by Christians. So let's be really clear here. But the other side is, what really strikes me is that, you remember when we had a conversation with the paramilitaries, we had a dialogue with paramilitaries and FARC guerrillas. So we had a dialogue one time in Colombia. Lori and Julie facilitated, my wife and Julie facilitated. But what was really striking is that, like, the people on the left were so sure that they were right. And it was okay for them to kill other people on the left because they are on the right, on the other side, because they were right. They were justified. And the people on the left were so sure that they could kill people on the right. It's okay because they're wrong and we're right. And one after another, and it didn't matter who they were able to justify their actions in committing these heinous crimes. And when I think about the United States and I think about the rhetoric that gets ramped up from the left wing and the right wing, and everybody feels justified to do that. And so that's the thing that really struck me listening to the Truth Commission reports, but from the right wing and the left wing. Do you have just a quick thought on that? That I know we've talked about this, right? That
I think when people is officially under war, they feel that they're allowed to do whatever they want because they're officially under war. So if you start calling that things like we are in conflict, we need to fight against others, you start to repeat that you are in conflict and this is a war, that becomes true. And once you are under war or under that conflict, you feel that you are allowed to eliminate the other part, because you are under this umbrella that gives you the power to finish other people's lives. So that's the problem. That's why we had this peace agreement in 2016, but we still have another problems. We were paying attention too much about the guerrilla problem. And when we had this peace agreement, wow, we realized it's not about guerrilla, it's about poverty, corruption, it's about power relations between classes, inequity, a lot of things that we never paid attention because we were paying attention to that guerrilla against the government thing.
Yeah, kind of like here, that people, we're not paying attention to what's actually really happening.
And we should pay attention in those things that are not becoming from the news or the people in power, because they're very happy to having us just fighting because of them and not paying attention in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I think, final comment here, what's also really striking is how it's like everybody can justify, people on the far left who want to shut down free speech. It's really important that they get to say what they want to say, but they then suddenly want to shut down the ability of someone else to say it. And I'm like, oh my God, right? Well, it doesn't take much for people on the left who are all about peace and justice to suddenly be supporting killing those other people. I'm like, wait, where was your peace and justice? Where did that go? But people lose that.